Welcome, you're listening to Digging Star Wars, your online journal of the films that inspired George Lucas to create the Star Wars saga. Hi, this is Chris Mitch. Welcome to this episode of Digging Star Wars. We are trying a new recording format today, so hopefully it all goes well. And we are also trying a very unique experiment. Usually when we have guests on Digging Star Wars, they're familiar with the Star Wars saga and whatnot. The guest that's sitting to my left has not seen the film we're going to discuss today because we're going to watch part of that during this episode. However, he has seen the classic film we're comparing it to, and that film is Singin In The Rain. And we are comparing this famous musical to Return of the Jedi, Episode 6 in the Star Wars series. So we're going to see how this goes. But before we get there, please allow me to introduce Dan Porto.
Hello, Chris.
Hi, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you for dealing with me trying to figure out how to record this episode.
I love it.
We were talking earlier, and I want to know, like, you are a professional stylist, and you've styled for television and for theater and for some short films, correct?
Correct.
All right. The reason I invited you on this particular episode is thinking musicals. You instantly popped into my mind because I don't think there's a person on the planet that I know of who loves musicals more than you. And why? Like, how did you get into being so passionate about it?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know why I love them as much as I do. Growing up, my mom and dad never played them at home. I did develop an interest in them, watching them on television. Have really always enjoyed them.
How old were you when you're like, oh, these are really cool?
I mean, honestly, probably since I started to watch The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Honestly. All right. Even though, I don't consider, I mean, it's a musical, but I don't consider it one of the grand musicals.
Sure.
But I think ever since that time, I probably fell in love with them.
Now, did that interest lead you into your career? Was that what drew you into, I want to work behind the scenes? Or did you perform at one time? Like, how did it all come about?
I have done some stage performing, and mostly musicals, some very, very little straight plays, but mostly musicals.
Was it more of the singing, the vocal stuff? Like, do you have dance training? Like what?
No, I have no dance training. Even when I go to Broadway and I see a show, I see plays and I see musicals on Broadway.
Right.
But I always think, here would be a great place for some music. Even
right.
when, you know what I mean? It's like, I just think everything is better with music.
Right. Fair enough.
Honestly.
And do you have a preference more for, to your point, seeing live performance versus a musical in a film format? Like,
I always love live theater performance, live musicals, just because you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
It's different every performance. It's exciting.
Theater.
It's there. You're a part of it. You see it.
Right. Very cool. Great. Well, I am very happy that you agreed to do this because I know when I asked you, there was a look of like, do I have to watch all the Star Wars movies?
Frankly, I was quite shocked. Having never seen one of the Star Wars movies, I was a little shocked.
Like, why me?
That's correct.
Yeah, right. But I think this is good because what I'm trying to do with this audio blog or podcast or whatever you want to call it is that I want to give fresh perspectives on films. And that's why, for example, when we had Scott Presswood on, he had never even seen the film we're going to talk about. And it was very interesting because it was getting a fresh reaction to a classic film. And in a weird type of way, this is a good partner to that because, here he hadn't seen the classic film, but he had seen the film we were comparing it to, the Star Wars film. And it's the other way around for you. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Singin' in the Rain, I have to set it up. So I'm going to go and just let you know a little bit of facts about Singin' in the Rain. It was Gene Kelly's follow-up to An American in Paris, which won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture in 1952. Singin' in the Rain, in its own regard, did get nominated for a lot, including a 1953 Academy Award nomination for Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Jean Hagan, for her hilarious performance as Lena Lamont. Do you remember some of her lines from Singin' in the Rain?
I can't stand.
which is great. It's fantastic.
She was really good.
She was really good. She did not win. Ironically, Jean Hagan passed away the year the original Star Wars was released. She passed away in 1977, which I thought was interesting. Singing in the Rain did win a Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture Actor, Donald O'Connor.
Oh.
Which I think's quite fitting. You would think it was Gene Kelly, but
right.
you know,
but I mean, Donald O'Connor was
awesome.
Quite amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also won a Writers Guild of America award for Best Written American Musical. And Singing in the Rain is not only referenced in Star Wars, but it's referenced in another science fiction classic. Do you know the film? Stanley Kubrick?
I have
You
no
could read my notes.
idea.
A
Clockwork Orange.
Yes, which is it's a very disturbing scene in Clockwork Orange. Again, people that don't know what Singing in the Rain is, let me read the synopsis off the case. So this is a bit long, so bear with me. This is right off the VHS case from MGM Home Video and Turner Classics. With Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, and Donald O'Connor at their liveliest, a Comden Green screenplay, excellent direction by Kelly and Stanley Donen, unforgettable music and lavish routines, Singing in the Rain has, quote, just about everything you could ask of a musical, unquote. That's from the Saturday Review. It remains one of the finest and most beloved musicals ever to come out of Hollywood. And then a write-up goes on to talk about how it's been restored in this particular version, including a deleted scene of You Are My Lucky Star featuring Debbie Reynolds. It's a classic. The supporting cast includes lovely Cyd Charisse. Now, did you meet Cyd Charisse?
No, I never did.
No. Was it Ellen, our friend Ellen, who met? Which I'm extremely jealous of. I would have loved to have met her. And hilarious comedian Jean Hagan, whose portrayal of the, quote, dumb blonde, unquote, hasn't been matched. All this makes this edition of Singing in the Rain a must for fans and collectors alike. Now, I'm a Gene Kelly fan, so I have to preface that.
As am I.
Okay. And at the end of this video, there's a little documentary about the behind the scenes and interviews with the writers and whatnot, and it portrays this as like this is God's gift to musical, like never before, the glory of Technicolor, and has a musical come along. I like Singing in the Rain a lot.
Right.
Gene Kelly and
who said that?
The writers and whoever were promoting this video.
I think they were drinking heavily.
There was a series of documentaries. I've seen them on PBS called That's Entertainment.
Right.
I've seen them 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And in 3. Gene Kelly says, calls Singing in the Rain everyone's favorite musical, which I thought, wow, that's a pretty ballsy statement to say. I like American in Paris. I understand why not many people have seen American in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
I think Singing in the Rain is a little more accessible and fun.
Right.
Do you think this is the greatest musical put on film ever?
I don't. No. And you told me that, because I had not heard that Gene had said that before.
Right.
And I'm surprised. I mean, it's entertaining. You know, there are definitely great numbers and great talent, but I don't know. I don't think it's the most amazing movie musical of all time.
What would you say are some that would contend for that?
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Wizard of Oz.
Right. I mean, who hasn't seen The Wizard of Oz? Right.
It's required.
I mean, I think people. I mean, I grew up with it.
No,
and every year we watched it, and I don't know. I assume people still do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's on TV. And it's
right.
An invitation.
I mean, that's got to be one of the big ones. But there have been so many.
Yeah. But what are some of your favorites? Like, you don't have to stick to it that they're the greatest. But
right. I mean, oh God.
Are you more?
I mean, I love a lot of the Judy Garland musicals. You know, everything from the early,
like A Star Is Born. It was just Judy Garland.
That was Judy Garland. Yeah. Like Summer Stock. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That's Gene Kelly's also in that with her. I mean, Oklahoma Carousel. I mean,
right,
and on and on.
Yeah, West Side Story.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is certainly great.
Right.
But I don't think the greatest.
Right. And that's the thing, too, that's kind of interesting about musicals is that I think the genre itself, people don't think a lot about. It's still going on because, to your point, you have Judy Garland and you have the golden age of Hollywood, but then you have Andrew Lloyd Webber and Jesus Christ Superstar and all that type of run to Rent and Chicago and like it's an ongoing genre. It's not dead. It's never like
but it died for a while. It
Correct.
died for a good while.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it resurfaced.
Right.
With Moulin Rouge, Rent, Hairspray, etc. But it died.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Well, I mean, I think these genres kind of go through phases, and it's funny because having other film geek friends, no one ever wants to talk about musicals. and
right.
But it's like it was such a part of Hollywood. Like
oh my God, it was everything.
Yeah,
back then.
Yeah,
it was.
And I'm just shocked that it
like every star, every actor had some kind of musical training. I think.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's
right.
like they at some point along the way, it seems that they all were involved in some kind
way,
of
or wanted to be in some way.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's because there's no middle ground. It seems like either people are passionate about the genre or they hate it.
I think it scares a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it's a different type of movie.
It is.
You know.
Yeah, it is.
And I think what's great about certain musicals, you know, particularly Singin in the Rain, is that kids can latch onto it and appreciate it. And but there's always another layer. Yeah. You know. And I loved Singin in the Rain as a kid, and then in watching it recently for this, I was taken back by Gene Kelly's character and how swarmy and like, you know, he's just chasing Debbie Reynolds and trying to use his...
But he always kind of plays that kind of character.
Yeah, it's almost like the Tom Cruise type of character. Like, I'm cocky, I'm handsome.
Exactly, always
cocky. You should be tripping over me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although he's not so much like that in Summer Stock. That's another story.
Okay, that's another story. So why are we talking about musicals in the first place? Why are we talking about Singin in the Rain? There was a documentary many years ago where George Lucas is explaining his inspiration for various scenes in the various films. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite scenes in Return of the Jedi is the scene in Jabba's court. And I know you haven't seen this. We're about to watch it. But where you see a musical performance take place. And it's sort of out of character of the film. Now, in the first Star Wars movie, there's a classic cantina scene where there's a band playing and there's music going on. But it wasn't about the music. That was just a backdrop. It was source music for the conversations going on. Okay. This particular scene, which you're about to watch, it's about like, hey, look at this. And Lucas mentioned that he always wanted to do a musical number in the middle of a Star Wars film, which I think's gutsy and kind of weird and okay. And that in Jedi, he had that opportunity, and he had the opportunity with this dancer. And in watching, when he said that, I was like, well, you know, is it musicals in general, which I think more of it is, but is there a particular musical in mind? And years ago, in one of my screenings of Singin in the Rain, it clicked in a certain scene with Cyd Charisse. Let's talk about that scene first, and then we'll watch the Star Wars thing. So there's, you know, per musicals, and you would know better than I, there's a narrative, and then the narrative slips in a song, and it's very, I think, ingenious how the writers and the directors and Gene Kelly and whatnot smooth these songs into a narrative storyline. Like, suddenly characters are talking. Like, Gene Kelly was down in the dumps. And then Donald O'Connor says, oh, don't be sad. And these things make him laugh. And but there's one scene in this where Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor, I don't know if their character names are escaping me at the time, but they're talking to a big executive, right? And they're saying, like, they're talking about how they're going to save this silent film. Right. And they're going to make it a musical, and this is, you know, happening in the age of Hollywood where the studios were paranoid about talkies. And so they come up with this cockamamie idea to save this show, and there's a big grand musical number, and Gene Kelly says to this executive, like, picture it now, and he pitches this elaborate dance scene, which does not fit neatly into the storyline whatsoever.
I think it's dreadful.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I love that, like, the scene that he puts. Right, I love it, but it seems really out of place.
It's absolutely out of place. And, it's startling how out of place it is, because their intention is to place it into this period piece where they're dressed in 18th century outfits, and and then all of a sudden it switches.
It's like 20s city gangster
bizarre
thing. Yeah,
it's freaky.
Yeah,
and it's just ridiculous, frankly.
I think part of the scene is we have Technicolor, and we really have to exploit it, and that's why there's. Like,
and we have a really good dancer named Cyd Charisse, so we're going to put her here.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It's very weird, but that performance by Cyd Charisse in that number is phenomenal. Like, I love it, and I love the choreography, and I think it's a very impressive production. The thing of, just to kind of explain that scene, you know, again, this is an isolated scene. It's almost like a movie within a movie. But Gene Kelly is portraying this character. This guy comes to city. He's happy-go-lucky. He's going to make it in, I guess, what, as a performer? How would you word it? Like, he's got to dance. That's the song. Got to dance, right? And he works his way through various stage, I guess, levels or strata of performing, like maybe like low-class vaudeville circuit to high society.
Wait, are we talking about the scene
We're talking
with
about
Cyd,
scene
or we're
with Cyd.
talking about the entire movie?
We're talking about that particular scene in Singing in the Rain. Like
Well, the one he's in is
Gotta
he's in
dance.
the jazz club,
right.
right? We're
Right.
talking about the right
Yes.
one? Okay.
Yeah.
And then it switches, and all of a sudden he's in a high society, almost supper club.
Right.
And then it turns into that dreamlike sequence with the drape.
Right. Okay, so actually it's a movie within a movie within a movie.
It's
I
kind
totally forgot
yeah,
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
You're right.
it's a little strange because it's basically 3 different times.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Right?
You're
That's the
absolutely
scene
right.
you're
I
talking
totally
about.
forgot it.
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, just to kind of make sense of this, he's in this scene. He portrays this young go-getter who works his way up in the ranks and becomes a legit performer. And he, in this process, he's very dorky. He's got like the black horn-rimmed glasses, and I don't know what type of hat you would call that. He has. It's like
Is it a little?
It's like a.
Is it a fedora?
No, it's like a corn cob type.
Is it?
Yeah, it's very silly looking.
All
It's
right.
very Ed Norton.
Is it?
Like from the Honeymooners type thing. And anyway, he's got a very dorky outfit. He's performing, and he spots Cyd Charisse, who's in this amazing green dress.
Correct.
sequin,
Smoking her long
cigarette, and she's smoking hot. Like, it's just amazing. It stops, and she does a very sexy, playful dance with him where she kicks his hat off to the side
Right.
and takes his glasses and raises up her skirt to polish his glasses on her fishnets and all that. And it's this really amazing scene. But you come to realize she belongs to these gangsters. She
Right.
belongs to these guys.
Mhm.
And there's the action of flipping the coin,
Mhm.
and that's so. Even while she's playing with Gene Kelly's nerdy character, nothing's ever going to happen really because she belongs to the gangster.
Right.
And then in that scene, there's that. To your point, there's that really crazy scene within a scene within a scene where there's this huge flowing drape and they're dancing in this like surreal space.
Right. Which is quite remarkable.
Yeah, I mean,
that whole scene.
like, technically it's beautiful.
Completely out of place, but
Yes.
just the same.
And very beautiful. I mean,
Really.
it's really elegant.
Yeah. I still can't. I don't know how they keep that drape moving the entire time.
I'm guessing just tons of fans off camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So, and then it comes back out of that fantasy sequence into our, dorky guy who's made it, and he realizes he can't have this girl, and then the scene ends, and then, well, basically he leaves, and you spot another up-and-comer, and I guess you're supposed to guess it's a cycle. Like, the city's always bringing in hungry performers, and they're going to go through the adventure we just went through.
Mm-hmm.
So that scene in particular, I feel, directly ties to the scene in Return of the Jedi, and fans who know Return of the Jedi will know it's basically the dance sequence with the Max Rebo Band, and there's a dancer in there called Oola, and we're going to watch that right now, and then we'll come back and go from there.
Okay.
Okay, so I just showed you the Max Rebo scene in Jabba's Court from Oola. We actually, just to be clear, we watched the theatrical release version in 1983, as well as the special edition version that was in theaters in 1997.
And I have one word.
Okay.
Yawnsville.
Wow.
That was boring.
Really?
Well, it wasn't exciting.
Okay.
I mean, compared to what we see today in movies, I thought it was...
Well, okay.
Right?
It hurts, but yeah. Well, to me, watching that in 1983, I was 12.
Okay.
So you can imagine my reaction to the girl in the green makeup and fishnets dancing around in a Star Wars movie. I'm like, what happened here?
Yeah.
And the music is just kind of throwing you off. And, I like the scene because one of the reasons Lucas did Jabba's Court the way he did it was in Star Wars, there's a scene where they go into the cantina and there's lots of alien characters. And, even if you haven't seen a Star Wars movie, a lot of people have seen it in commercials and whatnot.
Okay.
Lucas never liked the way that looked. He said, I felt like there should have been crazier creatures and more.
Okay.
So when he got to Return of the Jedi, he pretty much revisited that cantina scene and did this, and he wanted to do the big musical number. So he did this.
And that you consider a big musical number?
Well, as far as Star Wars goes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
I'll accept that.
So my thing is, when I saw this and when I was watching Singing in the Rain, I got to think, like, well, Cyd Charisse is in this gorgeous green glittering dress.
Right.
And she does this seductive dance. And it's really, to our point earlier, it's an out-of-place scene in the movie.
Sure.
And she belongs to this gangster. She's in this trapped relationship with this gangster in this little musical. I think that directly translates to Oola, the green girl he saw dancing. Like, I think there's a reason he chose her to be green.
Okay.
I think he's, whether it's buried in his subconscious or whatever, I think is like, well, it just makes sense for this girl to be green. And I think it's very ironic and appropriate that she is chained to a gangster. She's trapped to that. She's trapped to a Jabba the Hutt.
Okay.
The big worm slimy thing he saw is.
And you say he's what did you call him? A what? A mob? Something?
He's a gangster. He's an intergalactic gangster.
Okay.
Yeah. That's where I see the connection between the two films. And I'm curious if what do you think about that? If you think that's a little malarkey or not?
Right. I think you've been smoking something. I mean, oh, come on.
Really? You think that much of a stretch?
I mean, you're really grasping here. Don't you think so? Well, I mean, sure. I mean, yes, you could say, if the gangster connection between Oola,
yes,
and Big Fatso,
right, Jabba,
yes, him, and Cyd and the gangsters. But I do think it's a stretch.
No, it just
not to mention, she's dancing. Oola, sorry.
Yes.
I wouldn't exactly say she's dancing seductively.
Yeah.
I guess you can't be as amazing as Cyd Charisse was in that, obviously, because we're in a different place here.
Right.
But there's also no interaction between her and a man.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
Like there was with Cyd and
Gene Kelly. Yeah.
She reacts a little bit with Jabba.
Yes.
And she is green.
Yes.
But I don't think you can necessarily say that George Lucas found inspiration from Singing in the Rain.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's it, right? You're not giving me any more than this.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say about this particular scene is that, and this isn't necessarily like George Lucas is realizing this. I think this is a similarity between the two scenes that I'm seeing.
Okay.
Right?
And you just think it's coincidental.
I want to preface that, but I think it's ironic that the scene with the green girl dancer and a gangster in both films occurs in a musical number that is extremely out of place to the rest of the narrative. Like,
okay,
to our point, the Cyd, it's a great number with Cyd Charisse.
Right. So there's no other scene like this in any of
that scene has no bearings.
Wars.
That scene has no bearings on the main characters other than it sets up underneath the floor. There's a very big, hideous monster that eats people.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, literally, Lucas wanted to put a musical number in a Star Wars movie. That's what he did.
Okay.
So
then
you can buy that.
Yes. If you're saying that, having not seen the entire Return of the Jedi movie,
right?
Having just seen this scene,
right?
If you're saying that this scene is completely out of place in this movie,
yes,
as we both believe that the scene from Singin' in the Rain is
correct,
and you're saying that no other scene occurs in any of the other Star Wars movies like this?
Yeah, there's really
no musical.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is with Star Wars, which came out in 1977, and Empire Strikes Back, which came out in 1980, and Jedi, which comes out in 1983. A lot of times there's parallels drawn to the new trilogy. So Episode 1, when that came out, it was trying to generate the same excitement as when the first Star Wars film had its initial excitement after its release.
Okay.
When Attack of the Clones came out, which is Episode 2, they made a lot of distinct efforts to market it and have the marketing and posters and logos kind of emulate the Empire Strikes Back movie that came out in 1980. Return of the Jedi was originally released when it was written and was going to be released as Revenge of the Jedi.
Okay. And
they decided to change the name because they felt Revenge was an appropriate name for the Jedi. The Jedi are supposed to be basically King Arthurian type knights. They're not supposed to seek revenge. They're supposed to be noble.
Okay.
Okay. So when Episode 3 came out, it's named Revenge of the Sith. So Episode 3, if you will, is the modern-day counterpart to Return of the Jedi. Revenge of the Sith are bad guys.
Okay.
Return of the Jedi are good guys.
Okay.
Okay. There is a scene in Revenge of the Sith where a very important conversation has to happen between two characters, and it happens at an intergalactic opera.
Okay.
And it's very weird. The music's more like Brian Eno, Philip Glass, experimental music, and there's weird floating bubbles, and it's you get the feeling this is the type of opera that aliens watch. And the conversation between two main characters takes place. That's the important thing, the conversation between the two main characters, not the opera. It wasn't during it, but I feel like that scene is a nod to, in Jedi we did this wacky musical number with singing Muppets.
Okay.
Here we're doing an elegant, elevated art musical, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some similarities that kind of go through the Star Wars films. But not.
But this is out of place.
This is out of all 6 films.
Okay.
You only get something like this in Jedi.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I guess you can also say that the music in the Jedi scene, there is something sultry about it.
Right.
Right?
Now, to clarify, there's 2 different songs played.
In the 2 we just watched?
Yes.
Okay,
in the theatrical release, the song's called Laugh Tie Neck, which is just...
How do you know all this crap?
Because I got nothing better to do.
Seriously.
And I love that song, and that song was actually... I do. I love that song, and that song...
You are a big movie geek.
Yeah. And the song was recorded by a punk band of a production assistant on the filming of Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
They needed a song. Now, John Williams does all the music for the Star Wars movies, but that was a rare exception where they're like, we're going to do something different. We're going to, and they wrote the song in English, and ironically, the lyrics of that song are about working out, like every other song was about in the 80s. It's sort of like a Olivia Newton-John Let's Get Physical type thing. And then they just put it in alien gibberish, and there you have it.
Okay.
When they re-released it in 1997, they added a different song, which was a little bluesier. You had the little guy with like that harmonica-looking thing, and it felt like they were trying to do a Blues Travelers song for Star Wars. And I hated it. Because, again, I don't want to sound like a purist, but I remember sitting in theater and loving that wacky tune from the 1983 version in theaters. And then this version comes out. And they added characters, and I guess the girls in the background are supposed to be sexier and more enticing, but it just felt too much. And almost didn't it feel like too much when you compare those two things the 2 versions side by side?
Yeah, I mean, it felt just a little crazy.
Like they kept cramming stuff in there.
Right. I mean, I almost wonder. I mean, why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why did he choose to do that?
Yeah. I don't know.
He just felt it should be busier.
Yeah, and the song is busier.
Okay.
The song's busier. The space is busier. There's more characters occupying the space.
But we're comparing the first one more so.
I mean, that's the weird thing about the Star Wars films. There's the purists who believe what came out in theaters is what you should.
Right.
That's my film.
Mm-hmm.
But Lucas, in a recent interview, said, "You know what? My name's on the film. I own them.
Sure.
If I choose
do what you want.
If I choose to change it, you have to accept it." And there's some validity to that. Either one, I would say you could pick and choose. I think the irony is in the special edition, which is the more complicated one, the more recent one, is that it kind of comes off like that crazy Technicolor Singing in the Rain scene where it's like they just took advantage of the fact of we have a crane.
Right.
We put Gene Kelly on a crane and we could swoop him in. We got all these great colors. Like when he first burst into Gotta Dance, and you look at the people on the dance floor, there's every color you can imagine on that dance floor as far as there's girls dressed in green, they're dressed in red, orange, the guys in red suits,
the red background.
Yeah, it's just nutsy. So it's funny because and I think that might go back to why some people have problems with musicals. They might concentrate on more the garish quality of it, as opposed to the way they tell a story through dance and through song. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just think we don't go around singing and dancing in our regular lives. So I think...
Well, you do.
I certainly do. And I do it well. But that's why I think people are freaked out by musicals.
Right.
Because it's so removed from reality that they can't suspend, suspend
disbelief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, getting back to this.
Okay.
So, I can understand why you think that Lucas basically added this scene that was so out of line.
Right.
Yeah, out of character for him. So in that respect, I guess you can compare.
Yes.
You can compare that scene to the scene which was also out of place in Singing in the Rain.
Mm-hmm. But the gangster and the green girl, no.
Well, I mean, you know more about
Star
the
Wars.
Jedi.
Right.
And you know that Jabba is a gangster.
Right.
Okay. So giving that consideration, I can see why you would think that.
Right.
I can see, there is certainly a possibility that Lucas did that.
But you think it's
either intentionally or
unintentionally?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that, I don't know. I think that it's
stretch.
still a stretch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's fair enough.
I mean, I like you. So I'll give you a little bit here. I'll give you just a little bit.
Well, this is
I mean, sure. I mean, why not? We can argue anything.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Well, it's funny because, like, when people heard, in our little circle here in our productions, when people heard, like, oh, it's cool that Dan's going to be your guest. What are you guys going to talk about? Singing in the Rain. What? And what film's that related to? Return of the Jedi? Really?
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, who else but you would think of that? Seriously.
I mean, yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I completely...
I don't expect anyone else to think of it. That's my job. Like, my job is to say, like, hey,
and frankly, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to...
see if other people feel that way.
Correct. Yeah. Other people who know the Star Wars movies.
Well, that's hopefully they will. And that's the reason we do
We encourage your feedback.
That's right.
Feedback is a gift.
Yes. So wherever you're listening to this, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, this episode does reside on a blog, and that web address is diggingstarwars.blogspot.com. And there is certainly a section underneath each episode for you to comment, and I always invite people to comment on these things, and it's very interesting. And you can not only can you comment on our blog, but you can comment on Facebook, you can comment on YouTube. There's and if you cannot for some reason post a comment because there's something wrong with the website that you're on, whatever, you can always email comments to diggingstarwars@gmail.com. Well, I have a couple other comparisons between the two films, and they may be lost on you because you're not familiar completely with Jedi, but chime in if you want to.
I'll try.
I thought, and you can certainly talk to Singing in the Rain and their likenesses. Both films, whether intentional or unintentional, have a comical use of the word no. So in the scene Singing in the Rain, there's a scene where they're watching their film, and the film goes out of sync, and the one character goes, yes, 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 no, 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 and all that. So I thought that was funny. In Jedi, in the original release, there was no such thing, but in the Blu-ray version, there's yet another version of this film, which I don't have with us right now.
Okay.
And they added a scene where Vader, after he does something, goes, no, and it's because that character said that line in episode 3. He felt like, again, 3 and 6 have to sort of have parallel dialogue and scenes.
Okay.
And a lot of fans hate it. I don't want to say I don't care at this point, but it did bother me that he added it, but at the same time, whatever. I have my version of the film I like.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Both films follow the two guys and a girl formula. So Singing in the Rain, you got Gene Kelly and Donald Connor with Debbie Reynolds, and then you have Han, Luke, and Leia in Jedi. And I think this is especially sweet because Singing in the Rain has Carrie Fisher's mom and it has Debbie Reynolds.
It is interesting.
And I thought that was cool that how these films have some similarities, and it's a mother and daughter combination of films.
Mm-hmm.
Both films have technical tricks of the day. Obviously, we talked at nauseum about Technicolor and what Singing in the Rain exploited. Return of the Jedi, stop-motion animation and other visual effects of its day. I know you're saying it looked kind of stilted, but back in the day...
Oh, I'm sure
it was mind-blowing.
It was cutting technology at the time.
Right, yeah.
To me, watching it today, you were right. It seems very Muppet-like.
Yeah, right. Both films reference prior films from their creators. So in Singing in the Rain, in the Good Morning sequence, they reference American Paris when they all grab the yellow raincoats and the music switches to some Gershwin-esque
and the dancing in the foyer.
Yeah. And as we mentioned before, the whole Jabba court scene was basically Lucas revisiting stuff he didn't like in the Star Wars film of 1977.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I could do that better. The other thing is, and I thought this was interesting, is there's an interesting line of dialogue in Singing in the Rain. Lena Lamont, that's the character played by Gene Hagan, says a line, I just as soon kiss a tarantula.
She says it's a gene.
Yes, it's a gene. She's like, quick, get me a tarantula. And not in Return of the Jedi, but in Empire Strikes Back, Carrie Fisher says a line, "I just as soon kiss a Wookiee."
Oh,
and what's funny is, a Wookiee is a big hairy creature that's threatening and strong.
Not desirable.
Yes, and here a tarantula is the same type of thing. If you think of a big hairy tarantula, it's not something you want to kiss. And this is even more geeky and more obscure, but when they were making Episode 2, there is a scene in Episode 2 where there's two characters fighting in the rain. And one of the characters' name's Jango Fett. He has all this armor. Well, back when that film was in production, I guess to generate interest, on the Star Wars website, they would post production stills every day for geeks like me to go to the website and, what's the still today going to be?
Oh.
And one of the stills they had was Jango Fett on stage where they were going to shoot the rain sequence, holding an umbrella and striking a dance pose.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and I thought, like, oh, wow, that's cool, because, at the time when you saw the picture, you didn't realize that scene was going to take place in the rain, other than the fact he had an umbrella. So when the film came out, you're like, oh, it's so funny that now I know why he had an umbrella and everything else. But it was definitely a nod to Singing in the Rain, and I thought that is interesting, pretty cool. Mm-hmm. We talked about the mother-daughter aspect, right? So Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher. Mm-hmm. Both films have the leading ladies in a skimpy showgirl type outfit. Now, with Debbie Reynolds, it's at the party where she jumps out of the cake.
Correct.
And she does the song "All I Do Is Dream of You" the whole night through. Mm-hmm. And in Return of the Jedi, that green slave girl you saw get dropped to the floor, Princess Leia gets bumped up to that role wearing this outfit, wearing the slave girl outfit. So it's very revealing. And Val Voom was back in the day. But is there anything else that we didn't talk about Singing in the Rain that you wanted to get out? Or let me ask you this. There's people listening. They hate musicals, and you're like, you know what? If I could get them to watch one musical. Oh, I know. Look at that. I really put you on the spot, didn't I?
Question.
All right, well, let me say this. Some suggestions for people that are new to the genre. Any films at all. Like, well, I like this film. Mm-hmm. If you haven't seen Wizard of Oz. If you haven't seen Wizard of Oz, you should.
Well, The Wizard of Oz, unless you live under a rock, you should watch that movie at least once. I mean, seriously. Yeah. There's no excuse.
I know you wanted to talk about that movie more than Singing in the Rain. I know you did.
Well, that one I know beginning to end. Yeah. I could tell you a little crap about it like you're telling me about Star Wars.
Right.
Singing in the Rain.
Well, maybe we have to do that in the future.
Yeah. I could tell you how they dyed the horses in The Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll have to do that.
Yeah.
I know.
Other musicals that you have to see. I mean, Oklahoma Carousel.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, any Judy Garland musical, Mickey Rooney. Oh my God, there are so many.
Yeah. What about more recent musicals? Like, do you like Chicago?
Oh my God, Chicago is probably one of my favorite stage shows, and I actually thought the movie was really great.
Yeah.
Because it really truly stuck to the plot.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's a movie and it's different than the stage show, and there was more visually.
Right.
But it definitely was interesting. Chicago is one of my favorite musicals.
Yeah.
Somehow.
And
don't say Mamma Mia.
I'm not going to say Mamma Mia. Well, one other thing I wanted to mention before we go to is that so we talked about Singing in the Rain. How can I say it? Well, obviously there's Netflix and all those other things. Mm-hmm. However, Singing in the Rain is going to be on Turner Classic Movies on Sunday, February 19th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And it will also air again on TCM on February 26th at 1 p.m. So you can watch it or set your DVR. So if you're interested in seeing this musical we've been talking about, check it out. That's basically what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to thank you very much for your time today.
It was my pleasure.
Was it really your pleasure?
It really was.
Seriously, or was it torture?
Yes. No, it wasn't torture.
Yeah.
I mean, slightly torturous. Yeah. But no, it really wasn't.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking me. I appreciate it.
No, it's a lot of fun. And I hope those listening, if you have your thoughts about this, it's great. I say to every guest, like, it's your job to say whether I'm full of it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate the fact you're like, that's a bit of a stretch. So if you're listening, I'd love to hear your feedback on that, and whether it's been stressed or not. I also want to thank our music provider today. Our little music interludes are from a band named Steve, who I believe you're familiar with.
I am.
So it's very interesting to have their music, and I want to thank them. And I also want to thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate the fact that I'm starting to get emails and comments, and that the audio blog is growing and making somewhat of an impact.
Busta. All right, thank you, everybody. Take care.
Digging Star Wars is produced by Mitch Media and has no connection to Lucasfilm Limited whatsoever. Copyrights for films, trademark characters, and related materials discussed in Digging Star Wars remain with their respective owners. For a list of references or source material, please send an email to diggingstarwars@gmail.com.